The research vessel Horizon's Edge shuddered violently as alarms blared through every corridor. Dr. Rachel Morrison gripped her daughter's hand tighter, pulling the 8-year-old through the chaos of sparking cables and screaming crew members. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe, harder to see. "Mom, I'm scared," little Lily cried out, her voice barely audible over the sound of metal tearing apart. "I know, sweetheart, I know. We're going to be okay." Rachel lied through her teeth because that's what mothers do. They lie to protect their children from the truth, even when that truth is hurtling toward them at terminal velocity. The escape pods were just ahead. Rachel could see other crew members cramming into them, the doors sealing shut one by one. She shoved Lily toward the nearest open pod, but the ship lurched sideways. A support beam collapsed between them, and Rachel watched in absolute horror as her daughter stumbled backward, away from her, away from safety. "Lily!" Rachel screamed, trying to climb over the debris, but another explosion rocked the vessel. The floor beneath Lily gave way, and the girl disappeared through a gaping hole in the hull, tumbling into the alien sky below. Rachel's screams were swallowed by the void as her own escape pod automatically sealed and ejected. Through the small window, she watched her ship break apart like a toy, pieces of humanity's pride scattering across the peaks of a world they had no right to be near. Somewhere in that chaos, falling through clouds toward mountains humans had named the Forbidden Peaks, was her baby girl. The dragon planet below was beautiful and absolutely deadly. 3 moons hung in a purple sky, casting strange shadows across jagged mountains that looked like teeth trying to bite the heavens. Every survey drone humanity had ever sent down had been destroyed within hours. Every probe, every remote camera, all gone. The dragons didn't want visitors, and they had the teeth and fire to enforce that preference. Lily's emergency chute deployed, but it was damaged, full of holes that made her descent too fast, too rough. She crashed through the canopy of bizarre crystalline trees that sang in the wind, their branches scratching her face and tearing her thermal suit. She hit the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs, hard enough to make the world spin in nauseating circles. Blood trickled down her forehead. Her arm hurt so badly she couldn't move it. The cold hit her next, seeping through the tears in her suit like icy fingers. This planet's night was coming, and the temperature would drop below freezing within the hour. Lily knew this because her mom had made her memorize the planetary data. Rachel always said knowledge could save your life. Right now, that knowledge was telling Lily she was going to die. She forced herself to stand, to move, because staying still meant freezing. Every step hurt, but she climbed higher into the mountains, looking for shelter, for anything. Her emergency beacon was silent, its light dark. Broken, like everything else. The cave appeared like a miracle, a dark opening in the rock face that promised protection from the wind. Lily crawled inside, her small body shaking uncontrollably. The interior was warmer, much warmer, heated by something deep in the planet's crust. And there, arranged in a perfect circle, were smooth oval stones the size of beach balls, each one radiating blessed heat. Lily didn't think. She couldn't think anymore. She just crawled to the center of those stones and curled up between 2 of them, pressing her frozen body against their warmth. Her eyes closed almost immediately, consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. She never noticed the scales on the stone's surfaces, never saw the gentle pulsing light beneath the shells. She had no idea she'd just made a bed in a dragon's nest. High above, circling on wings that blotted out the stars, 3 young dragons caught the scent of something foreign in their home. They were juveniles, barely past their 2nd year, still covered in the darker scales of youth. Their mother had died 5 days ago, killed by a larger male trying to claim their territory. They'd been alone since then, hungry and desperate, defending their unhatched siblings from a world that wanted to devour them. Now something had invaded their nest. Something that smelled like meat and fear. The largest of the 3, its scales showing hints of bronze beneath the juvenile gray, shrieked a challenge into the night. Its siblings answered, and together they dove toward their cave, claws extended, fire building in their throats. Whatever had dared enter their home was about to learn why the galaxy feared dragon young. They showed no mercy, no hesitation, no compassion. They killed first and never bothered with questions. It was their nature, their survival instinct, the reason their species had never been conquered. The 3 young dragons landed at the cave entrance, their eyes adjusting to the darkness, their nostrils flaring as they caught the full scent of the intruder. They moved forward as one, a wall of scales and teeth and barely contained violence. Their claws clicked against stone as they approached their nest, ready to tear apart whatever threat awaited them. What they found would change everything. The bronze-scaled dragon cub froze at the edge of the nest, its entire body going rigid. Behind it, its two siblings pressed closer, trying to see what had stopped their leader. They expected prey, expected something to kill. What they found instead made no sense to their young minds. A tiny creature, barely bigger than their smallest sibling, lay curled between their eggs. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't trying to steal or destroy. It was just sleeping, its small body wrapped protectively around the unhatched young, as if trying to keep them warm. The creature's skin was pale, almost fragile-looking, covered in torn fabric that leaked the scent of blood and fear. Its breathing was wrong, too shallow, too irregular. The bronze cub tilted its massive head, confused. Every instinct screamed at it to strike, to eliminate the threat. But there was no threat. This thing was dying, its life force flickering like a candle in the wind. And somehow, in its final moments, it had chosen to protect their eggs rather than harm them. The smaller of the three cubs, its scales a deep gray that would one day turn silver, chittered nervously. It wanted to attack, to follow the ancient ways. But the bronze cub growled low, a sound of uncertainty rather than aggression. It moved closer, sniffing the strange creature. The scent was alien, completely unknown, but underneath the blood and fear was something else. Something that reminded the cub of its mother, of safety, of pack. The creature shivered violently, even in sleep. The bronze cub made a decision that would have horrified every adult dragon on the planet. It curled its large body around the small invader, sharing its warmth. The other two cubs stared in shock, but after a moment, they too pressed close, creating a living blanket of scales and heat around the dying child. Lily didn't wake, but her shivering slowly stopped. 3 days and nights passed like a fever dream. The cubs should have been hunting for themselves, but instead they hunted for their unexpected nestmate. The bronze one proved to be a natural leader, organizing their efforts. They brought back small creatures from the mountains, pre-chewing the meat the way their mother once had for them, trying to feed the unconscious human child. Most of it she couldn't swallow, but sometimes a little would slip down her throat, keeping her barely alive. The cubs learned her sounds, the way she whimpered in pain, the rhythm of her breathing. When predators approached the cave, drawn by the scent of vulnerability, the three young dragons fought with a ferocity that surprised even themselves. They were protecting pack now, defending family, and that made them more dangerous than hunger ever could. On the fourth day, Rachel Morrison stood in the command center of the makeshift rescue base, staring at a map with eyes that hadn't slept in 96 hours. 17 other survivors from the crash watched her with pity and helplessness. They'd searched every grid section twice, found 6 bodies, rescued 11 survivors, but no Lily. The dragon world was vast, and their sensors were almost useless against all the electromagnetic interference from the crystalline forests. "We have to expand the search," Rachel said for the 100th time, her voice hoarse and breaking. Captain David Chen put a hand on her shoulder. "Rachel, we've covered everything within 100 kilometers of the crash site. If she survived the fall, if she found shelter, the cold alone would have." "Don't." Rachel's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." A young technician named Tyler looked up from his console, his eyes wide. "Captain, I'm picking up something. It's faint, really faint, but it could be an emergency beacon signature. It's intermittent, like the power source is almost dead." Rachel was at his station before he finished speaking. "Where?" Tyler's hand shook as he pointed at the map. "The Forbidden Peaks. The high ranges. But Dr. Morrison, that's dragon nesting territory. Every survey team that's gone near those mountains has been attacked. The dragons don't let anything near their young." "I don't care if it's the gates of hell itself," Rachel said, already grabbing her gear. "That's my daughter." Captain Chen tried to organize a proper rescue team, but Rachel was already running for the transport. 6 volunteers followed her, including Tyler and a combat medic named Nicole Hayes. They all knew the statistics, knew that dragon cubs were more aggressive than the adults, that nesting mothers killed first and never asked questions. They went anyway, because that's what humans do. They run toward danger when someone needs saving, even when every logical bone in their body screams to run away. The transport flew low through the crystalline canyons, avoiding detection as best they could. They landed 2 kilometers from the beacon's last known position and went the rest of the way on foot, climbing rocky slopes in silence, every member of the team armed and terrified. Nicole spotted the cave first, pointing silently. Rachel's heart hammered so hard she thought it might explode. She took the lead, moving toward the dark opening with her weapon raised but her finger off the trigger. Inside, she could hear sounds, strange clicking and chittering that made her blood run cold. Dragon cubs. Rachel stepped into the cave and her weapon clattered to the ground. There, in a nest made of smooth stones that she now realized were eggs, was Lily. Alive. Unconscious but breathing steadily. And surrounding her, keeping her warm, protecting her like treasure, were 3 young dragons. The bronze one raised its head, fixing Rachel with eyes that glowed like molten copper in the darkness. It didn't attack, didn't threaten. It just watched, intelligent and wary, as this new human approached. Rachel's hands shook as she raised them slowly, showing she was unarmed. She took one step forward, then another. Behind her, she could hear Nicole's sharp intake of breath, could feel the tension of her team ready to drag her back to safety. But Rachel kept walking until she was at the edge of the nest. The bronze dragon cub studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then, deliberately, it shifted its body aside, creating a space for Rachel to reach her daughter. The other 2 cubs followed its lead, moving back but not leaving, watching with curiosity rather than hunger. Rachel dropped to her knees beside Lily, tears streaming down her face as she felt her daughter's pulse, weak but steady. "Thank you," she whispered to the dragons, not knowing if they could understand, not caring. "Thank you for keeping her alive." The bronze cub chirped softly, a sound almost like acknowledgement. When Nicole moved forward with medical equipment, the cubs watched but didn't interfere. They seemed to understand that these new humans were trying to help, not harm. As the team carefully prepared to move Lily, the 3 dragon cubs stood and followed. No amount of gentle discouragement could make them leave. They'd found something they thought was lost when their mother died. They'd found family. And dragons, it turned out, never abandoned family. Even when that family walked on 2 legs and came from the stars. The medical bay wasn't designed for dragons. It was a sterile white room built for humans, with human-sized beds and human equipment that beeped and hummed with familiar efficiency. But now 3 dragon cubs sat in the corner, their massive bodies pressed together, their glowing eyes never leaving the small figure lying in the hospital bed. Lily had been unconscious for 6 days. The doctor said she'd suffered a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, a fractured arm, hypothermia, and dehydration that should have killed her 3 times over. But she was alive, and everyone knew why. Those 3 dragons in the corner had kept her heart beating when everything else wanted to stop. Rachel hadn't left her daughter's side except when the doctors forced her to eat or sleep. She sat in a chair next to the bed, holding Lily's small hand, talking to her about everything and nothing. About home, about Dad who was on his way from Earth, about how brave she'd been. And the whole time, the dragons listened. The bronze one, the leader, watched Rachel with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. It wasn't the blank stare of an animal. It was the focused attention of someone trying to understand a foreign language, piecing together meaning from tone and gesture. When Rachel cried, the dragon made a low rumbling sound that somehow felt comforting. When she laughed, remembering a funny story about Lily's 6th birthday, the dragon's scales seemed to shimmer brighter. The medical staff were terrified at first. Dr. Patricia Wells, the chief physician, had insisted the creatures be removed immediately. "They are predators," she'd argued. "Keeping them in here is insane. What if they decide the girl looks like food?" But Captain Chen had seen something in that cave that changed his mind about a lot of things. They had 3 days alone with her, he'd said quietly. 3 days when she was completely helpless. They could have eaten her in minutes. Instead, they kept her alive. "I think we owe them the benefit of the doubt." The compromise was armed guards outside the medical bay at all times, stun weapons ready. But as the days passed, even the guards relaxed. The dragons never acted aggressive. They didn't try to hunt or attack. They just waited, patient as stone, for the little human who'd slept in their nest to wake up. On the 7th day, Lily's eyes fluttered open. Rachel was dozing in her chair when she heard it, a soft whimper that brought her instantly awake. "Lily? Baby, can you hear me?" Lily's eyes focused slowly, confusion giving way to recognition. "Mom?" Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from disuse. "Where am I? What happened?" "You're safe, sweetheart. You're in the medical bay. You've been asleep for a week." Rachel's tears came fast and hot, relief overwhelming her. "Oh God, Lily, I thought I'd lost you." Lily tried to sit up but winced at the pain. Her eyes drifted past her mother and went wide. "Mom, there are dragons in the room." Rachel turned, suddenly remembering their unusual guardians. The 3 cubs had stood up, their attention laser-focused on the bed. The bronze one took a tentative step forward, making a clicking sound deep in its throat. "It's okay," Rachel said quickly, though she wasn't entirely sure it was. "They're the ones who saved you, honey. You fell into their nest, and instead of hurting you, they kept you alive." Lily stared at the creatures, memories slowly filtering back through the fog of injury and medication. She remembered the cold, the fear, the warm stones. She remembered waking briefly in the darkness to find massive shapes surrounding her, remembered feeling safe despite knowing she shouldn't. The eggs, she whispered. I slept with their eggs. The bronze dragon chirped again, louder this time, and moved closer to the bed. Dr. Wells, who'd been monitoring from the doorway, started forward in alarm, but Rachel held up a hand to stop her. Lily did something that made every adult in the room hold their breath. She reached out her good hand toward the dragon. It's okay, she said softly. I remember you. You kept me warm. The bronze dragon closed the distance and gently pressed its snout against Lily's palm. The touch was careful, controlled, nothing like the vicious predators they were supposed to be. A rumbling sound came from the creature's chest, almost like a cat's purr but deeper, resonating through the room. She's purring, Lily said, wonder in her voice. Mom, she's purring at me. The other two dragons approached then, emboldened by their siblings' success. They pressed close to the bed, making the same rumbling sound, and Lily laughed for the first time since the crash. It was weak and tired, but it was genuine joy. Over the next 3 days, something remarkable happened. Lily began teaching the dragons words. It started accidentally when she asked for water and the bronze dragon's ears perked up at the sound. When a nurse brought the cup, Lily said water again, and the dragon repeated it back, or tried to. What came out was more like watia, all clicks and growls, but it was undeniably an attempt at human speech. The linguistic team arrived within hours, equipment in tow, barely believing the reports. Dragons weren't supposed to have vocal cords capable of mimicking human sounds. Their language was all subsonic rumbles and ultrasonic clicks, nothing the human ear could properly hear. But these 3 cubs were learning, adapting, changing the very structure of how they communicated. Say hello, Lily encouraged, her spirits lifting with each small victory. Hello, the bronze one managed, and the 2 others immediately tried to copy her. Soon the medical bay echoed with 3 dragons attempting their first human words, sounding like rocks trying to sing but improving with each attempt. Lily named them on the 4th day. The bronze leader became copper because of the metallic shine in her scales. The silver-gray one became ash for the way his scales looked like burnt metal. The smallest, whose scales had hints of deep blue, became storm for the way she moved, quick and unpredictable like lightning. Rachel watched her daughter bond with these alien creatures and felt her understanding of the universe shift. Every xenobiology textbook said dragons were solitary, aggressive, incapable of forming attachments outside their own species. Every report said their young were more dangerous than their adults, driven purely by hunger and territorial instinct. But here was her 8-year-old daughter, teaching 3 dragon cubs to play simple games, to understand commands, to respond to affection. When Lily was tired, they'd settle around her bed like enormous guard dogs. When she was sad, they'd make that comforting rumble until she smiled again. When she laughed, their scales would shimmer with colors that scientists didn't have names for yet. The Galactic Council's emergency session lasted 18 hours. Representatives from 4 to 7 worlds watched the footage from the medical bay and argued about what it meant. The Dragon Homeworld's ambassador, a scarred veteran named Elder Krati, watched in stony silence as a human child scratched copper behind her ear ridge and the massive predator's eyes closed in contentment. This is impossible, Krati finally said, his voice heavy with something between wonder and grief. Our young do not bond. They do not trust. It is our way, our nature. Admiral Helen Foster, Earth's representative, leaned forward. Maybe it's not nature, Elder. Maybe it's nurture. Maybe your cubs are violent because they are raised in isolation, taught that survival means trusting no one. My granddaughter is about Lily's age. She has a dog bigger than she is, and they are best friends. Not because the dog isn't dangerous, but because they grew up together, learned to trust each other. The chamber erupted in debate, but Elder Krati just stared at the screen where Lily was teaching the 3 cubs a clapping game, their massive claws trying to mimic her small hands. Something in his ancient eyes cracked, just a little. If this is true, he said quietly, then we have been wrong for 10,000 years. The conference room felt too small for the weight of the decision being made. Rachel sat at one end of the long table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Across from her sat Elder Krati, his massive frame barely fitting in the reinforced chair, his scales dulled with age but his eyes still sharp as broken glass. Between them sat various officials, scientists, diplomats, all talking over each other in a chaos of opinions and concerns. The law is clear, Krati rumbled, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Dragon young belong with dragons. These cubs must be returned to our homeworld, to be raised in the traditional manner by appointed guardians. Traditional manner? Rachel's voice shook with barely contained fury. You mean abandoned to survive alone, fighting for scraps, learning that trust equals death? That's what you call tradition? Kraati's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or shame. It is our way. It has always been our way. It makes us strong. It makes you lonely, Rachel shot back. It makes your children into weapons instead of people. I've read the reports, Elder. I know your cubs have a 60% mortality rate before they reach maturity. 60%. More than half of your children die because you force them to face the world alone. The room went silent. Even the diplomats, trained to fill every quiet moment with words, had nothing to say to that. Dr. Wells cleared her throat awkwardly. The situation is unprecedented. The cubs won't leave Lily voluntarily. We've tried to move them to appropriate habitats 3 times. Each time they became aggressive, not toward people, but toward the environment itself. They destroyed the containment areas and returned to the medical bay within hours. They imprinted on her, added Dr. Nathan Price, the xenopsychologist who'd been studying the bonding process. It's more than just attachment. Lily became their anchor when their mother died. She was vulnerable, non-threatening, and she was in their nest with their siblings. Every instinct they had for protection and pack bonding focused on her. Separating them now would be psychologically devastating, possibly fatal. Elder Kraati's claws scraped against the metal table. Human sentiment does not change dragon law. The cubs must return. The door to the conference room opened, and everyone turned. Lily walked in, her arms still in a cast, Copper walking beside her like a massive shadow. The dragon cub had grown noticeably in the past 2 weeks, now easily the size of a small car, but she moved with careful precision around the fragile human child. Lily, sweetie, you should be resting, Rachel started, but her daughter shook her head. I'm tired of everyone deciding my future without asking me what I want, Lily said, her voice stronger than it had any right to be. She walked to the table and looked directly at Elder Kraati. The ancient dragon met her gaze, and something passed between them, understanding maybe, or recognition. Elder Kraati, Lily said carefully, pronouncing his name the way Copper had taught her, with the proper clicking undertones. I know you want to take them home. I know you have laws. But they're my family now, just like I'm theirs. And families shouldn't be torn apart because of rules written by people who are already dead. Kraati's expression shifted, surprise coloring his features. You speak with dragon inflection. The cubs taught you? We teach each other, Lily corrected. Copper, Ash, and Storm are learning human words. I'm learning dragon sounds. We're figuring it out together because that's what family does. Copper chirped softly and moved closer to Lily, her massive head lowering to the girl's level. Lily reached up and touched the dragon's snout, a gesture of affection that would have been unthinkable a month ago. My daughter died in the last nesting season, Kraati said suddenly, his voice heavy with old grief. She was strong, fierce, everything a dragon should be. But she was alone when the mountain cats attacked. Alone because that is our way. I found her body 3 days later. He paused, his ancient eyes focusing on Copper and Lily. I have often wondered if things would have been different if she'd had pack, if someone had been there to fight beside her. The silence that followed was different now, softer somehow. Rachel leaned forward. Elder Kraati, what if there was another option? What if Lily and I went with the cubs back to your homeworld? Not as visitors or prisoners, but as family. We could raise them together, your way and our way, and document what happens. Maybe we'd fail. Maybe your traditions exist for reasons we don't understand. But maybe, just maybe, we'd learn something that could help both our species. You would leave your world? Kraati asked, genuine surprise in his voice. Leave your people, your life, to live among dragons. I'd follow my daughter into hell itself if that's what she needed, Rachel said simply. And right now, she needs those 3 cubs as much as they need her. I'm not going to be the one who breaks that bond. Captain Chen stood up, drawing attention. Earth Command has authorized me to make this offer official. Dr. Morrison and her daughter would go as cultural ambassadors, the first human dragon family unit. Would establish a small research station, completely under dragon jurisdiction, where this experiment could proceed under proper observation. If it works, it could change everything we know about interspecies cooperation. If it fails, we've lost nothing but time. Nothing but time? Kraati's laugh was bitter. You risk your child, human. My people will not welcome you. Many will see this as an insult, an invasion. Your daughter could be in danger. Lily spoke up again, her hand still resting on Copper's scales. I've already been in danger, Elder. I crashed on your planet, fell through trees, broke my arm, and nearly froze to death. And your people's children saved me. Not adult dragons with diplomacy and laws, but kids who chose kindness over killing. If they could do that, I think we can figure out how to live together. Copper made a sound, not quite words but not quite animal noise either. It sounded like agreement, like a voice learning to speak across the vast distance between species. Ash and Storm, who'd been waiting outside the door, pushed their way in now and surrounded Lily, a protective circle of scales and teeth that somehow felt more like a hug than a threat. Elder Krati stared at them for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before, almost fragile. There is a valley on our world, near the southern mountains. It was my daughter's nesting ground. It has been empty since she died. If you come, if you truly mean to do this thing, you may use that land. I will vouch for you before the council, though many will call me fool for it. Why? Rachel asked. Why take that risk? The old dragon's eyes were wet when he answered. Because I do not wish to spend another generation burying children who died alone. Because perhaps this human child sees something we have blinded ourselves to. Because maybe, just maybe, it is time for my people to remember what it means to have family instead of just bloodlines. The vote was called. Not everyone agreed. There were concerns about safety, about precedent, about violating the cultural independence of a sovereign species. But in the end, the motion passed by a narrow margin. Rachel and Lily would go to the dragon homeworld. They would live among a species that terrified the galaxy. They would raise 3 cubs who by all logic should have killed them. And they would try to prove that the deadliest creatures in known space could learn to love. The transport would leave in 3 days. Lily spent those days teaching Copper, Ash, and Storm everything she could think of. Human games, human words, human ideas about family and trust and loyalty. The dragons absorbed it all like dry ground drinking rain, hungry for connection they didn't know they'd been missing. On the last night before departure, Rachel found Lily sitting with the cubs in the cargo bay that had been converted into their temporary quarters. The girl was reading them a story from an old Earth book, something about a princess and a dragon who became friends. You scared? Rachel asked, sitting down beside her daughter. Lily thought about it, then nodded. Yeah. But excited too. Is that weird? No, baby. That's called being brave. Rachel put her arm around Lily's shoulders. We're about to do something no human has ever done. We're going to live with dragons, raise dragons, hopefully teach the galaxy that different doesn't have to mean enemy. Copper rumbled softly and rested her massive head in Lily's lap, careful not to put too much weight on the small human. Ash and Storm pressed close on either side, a wall of living warmth and protection. They're good kids, Lily said simply. Someone just needed to give them a chance. Rachel looked at her daughter, at this 8-year-old child who'd somehow become a bridge between worlds, and felt pride swell in her chest so fierce it almost hurt. You gave them more than a chance, Lily. You gave them family. Now let's go show their whole planet what that means. The dragon homeworld looked nothing like Earth. 2 suns hung in a copper sky, casting double shadows across mountains that stabbed upward like broken bones. The air tasted of sulfur and something sweet that Rachel couldn't identify, and the gravity was just different enough to make every step feel slightly wrong. But Lily didn't seem to notice any of it. She stood at the transport's ramp, Copper pressed against her side, and looked at the alien landscape with eyes full of wonder instead of fear. It's beautiful, she breathed. The landing zone was empty except for Elder Krati and a handful of younger dragons who watched the humans with barely concealed hostility. Their scales rippled with colors that Rachel's translator identified as suspicion and disgust. One of them, a massive male with scars across his snout, took a threatening step forward. This is a mistake, Elder, the scarred dragon growled. Bringing prey animals to our world, letting them raise our cubs as if they were pets. It dishing us everything we are. Copper moved faster than Rachel thought possible. The young dragon positioned herself between Lily and the threat, her body language screaming challenge despite being a fraction of the adult size. Ash and Storm flanked her immediately, the 3 cubs forming a defensive wall that said clearer than words, "You'll have to go through us first." The scarred male stopped, shock rippling across his scales. They defend the humans? This is unnatural. This is wrong. No, Elder Krati said quietly, but his voice carried authority that made everyone freeze. This is what we forgot. Look at them, Commander Vex. Those cubs would die for that child. When was the last time you saw such loyalty in one so young? When was the last time our children fought for anything except their own survival? Vex had no answer to that. The valley Krati had promised them was everything Rachel could have hoped for and nothing she'd expected. A crystal-clear stream cut through volcanic rock, creating pools of warm water heated by geothermal vents. Cave systems riddled the cliff faces, offering shelter from the harsh weather. Plant life that looked like a cross between coral and trees grew in impossible colors, providing food for the smaller creatures that Copper and her siblings would need to hunt. But the best part was the eggs. 5 of them, arranged in a shallow cave just like the nest where Lily had first fallen. They were Copper's siblings, the eggs that Lily had kept warm with her own dying body heat, and they'd been transported here with careful reverence by Elder Krati himself. They'll hatch within the moon cycle, Krati explained. Traditionally, Copper, Ash, and Storm would be driven away by guardians to prevent them from competing with their younger siblings for resources. But you are trying something different, yes? Rachel nodded, her hand finding Lily's. We're going to raise them all together. One family, multiple generations. Let the older cubs help teach and protect the younger ones. Madness, Vex muttered, but he stayed to watch anyway. The first weeks were harder than Rachel wanted to admit. The heat was oppressive, the food supplies from Earth tasted wrong after processing through decontamination, and every night brought sounds that made her grip her weapon and pray the shelter's force field would hold. Dragons didn't have predators on their own world, but that didn't mean the planet was safe. Things with too many legs and not enough eyes crawled through the darkness, and sometimes the ground itself would shake as massive creatures moved through the deep places beneath the mountains. But Lily thrived in ways that defied explanation. She was learning the dragon language properly now, not just mimicking sounds but understanding the subsonic layers that carried emotional context. She could tell when Copper was anxious versus excited, when Ash was being playful versus aggressive, when Storm was tired or hungry or just wanted attention. The cubs, in turn, were learning human concepts that had no equivalent in dragon culture. The word please took 2 weeks to teach. Dragons didn't ask, they took or they didn't. The idea that you could want something but wait for permission to receive it was completely alien. But Lily was patient, and eventually Copper managed her first polite request, water, please. The pride in the young dragon's eyes when Lily brought her a bowl was something Rachel wished she'd captured on video. Thank you came next, then sorry, then help me. Each phrase was a revolution, a crack in the armor of solitary survival that dragon culture had built over millennia. Other dragons started coming to watch. At first they came to mock, to see the foolish humans playing house with predators. But they stayed to witness something they'd never seen before, dragon cubs playing. Actually playing, not fighting for dominance but engaging in games with rules and cooperation. Lily taught them hide and seek, and the sight of 3 massive dragon cubs trying to squeeze into hiding spots too small for them while Lily counted made even Vex crack what might have been a smile. The eggs hatched on a night when both moons were full. Rachel woke to Copper's urgent chirping and found all 3 older cubs gathered around the nest, watching with fascination as cracks appeared in the shells. Lily was already there, sitting cross-legged at a safe distance, whispering encouragement. The first hatchling was tiny, barely the size of a house cat, with scales that shimmered like oil on water. It tumbled out of its egg and immediately tried to breathe fire, managing only a small puff of smoke that made it sneeze. Copper moved forward carefully, making soft rumbling sounds, and the hatchling responded by climbing onto her older sister's snout. 4 more followed over the next hour. 5 new lives, vulnerable and perfect, and instead of being left to fend for themselves in a harsh world, they were surrounded by siblings who'd learned a different way. Lily approached slowly, her hands empty and open. The smallest hatchling, barely able to walk, stumbled toward her. Rachel's heart stopped as the tiny dragon opened its mouth, showing needle-sharp teeth. But instead of biting, it made a sound suspiciously like hello, copying the word it must have heard its older siblings practice 1,000 times. Lily laughed, tears streaming down her face, and gently picked up the hatchling. It curled in her arms, chirping contentedly, and within minutes all 5 babies were climbing on the human child, trusting her completely because their older siblings did. Elder Krati stood at the entrance to the cave, having arrived with a dozen other observers. His expression was unreadable, but his scales showed colors Rachel had learned meant deep emotion. Impossible, breathed a younger female dragon beside him. Hatchlings don't trust anything. They're all fear and teeth until their 2nd season. These ones don't know fear, Krati said softly. Because they've never been given reason to learn it. Word spread across the dragon homeworld like wildfire. The human child who raised dragons. The cubs who chose family over instinct. More dragons came each day, watching from the valley ridges, seeing their own kind behave in ways that shouldn't exist. Some were angry, calling it contamination of their culture. Others were curious, asking careful questions about human child-rearing practices. A few were heartbroken, seeing what might have been if their own children had known gentleness. 6 months after their arrival, the first dragon mother approached Rachel with a request that changed everything. She was young, barely past adolescence herself, with fresh scars from defending her nest alone. Her 2 cubs, only weeks old, were small and aggressive, biting each other constantly, already learning that violence was the only language. "Show me," the mother said, her voice cracking with desperation. "Show me what the human does. My children, they will kill each other before the season ends. This is normal, this is our way, but I don't want to lose them." Rachel looked at Lily, who was currently mediating a dispute between Ash and one of the hatchlings over a particularly shiny rock. Her daughter had become something between a teacher, a sibling, and a guardian to 8 dragon cubs of various sizes, and somehow they all listened to her. "It starts with trust," Rachel told the mother. "And it starts with you. Your cubs are violent because they think the world is violent. Show them something different." Over the following weeks, Rachel and Lily worked with the young dragon mother, teaching her things that felt obvious to humans but were revolutionary to dragons. How to comfort instead of correct. How to play instead of fight. How to say "I'm proud of you" in ways that cubs could understand. The changes were small at first, barely noticeable. But slowly, the mother's cubs stopped trying to kill each other and started working together. They still fought, because they were dragons and fighting was in their blood, but it became practice instead of survival. Play instead of war. Other mothers came. Then fathers. Then elders who'd lost so many children they'd stopped counting, desperate to know if there was another way. Rachel and Lily's Valley became a pilgrimage site, a place where dragons came to learn how to be families instead of just survivors. A year after their arrival, the valley was home to 37 dragons of various ages, all learning to live in something resembling community. Copper, now nearly full-grown and massive enough to carry Lily on her back, had become the de facto leader of the younger generation. She taught hunting and fighting, yes, but also cooperation and communication. She was everything a dragon should be, powerful, intelligent, fierce, but she was also something dragons had rarely been, kind. The Galactic Council received regular reports about the experiment, and the data was undeniable. Cubs raised in the valley had a 98% survival rate compared to the traditional 60%. They developed cognitive abilities faster, learned complex problem-solving earlier, and showed capacity for interspecies cooperation that adult dragons struggled with. The valley cubs were healthier, happier, and arguably more dangerous than traditional cubs because they could work in coordinated groups instead of fighting alone. Elder Krati stood with Rachel on the cliff overlooking the valley, watching Lily teach a group of young dragons the concept of a relay race. The sight would have been absurd a year ago. Now it felt natural, right, like watching pieces of a puzzle finally fit together. "My people are changing," Krati said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Not all embrace it. Many cling to the old ways, call this weakness. But I have lived 300 years and buried 4 children. If I had known then what your daughter has shown us now, perhaps they would still fly." Rachel squeezed his massive foreclaw gently. "It's not weakness to love, Elder. It's the bravest thing any of us can do." Below, Lily crossed some invisible finish line first and threw her arms up in victory. Copper and the other cubs surrounded her, chirping their version of cheers, their scales flashing with colors that meant joy and pride and belonging. A human child who fell from the sky had done what armies and diplomats never could. She'd shown the galaxy's most feared predators that they didn't have to be alone. That family was stronger than fear. That trust was worth the risk. And the dragons, finally, were learning to fly together.